There's a parable that Jesus taught. You may remember it. It's the parable of the talents. Now, a talent in those days was a coinage. It was an amount of money. It was actually a measurement of weight, and they weighed money in those days by how much it weighed. Its value was how much it weighed. You remember the story that the guy who owned a vineyard, or he owned a bunch of land, and he brought his guys in. He said, "Hey, I'm leaving for a while. I'm going to be back. I want you guys to make some money with my money." And so he gives each of them a different amount of money. And he expects them to make him some money while he's gone. He's gone. He comes back. He says, "Okay, guys, how'd you do?" And the guy that had 10 goes, "Man, you gave me 10. I made 10 more. Great. Blessings to you. I'm going to give you 10 cities." Talks to the guy who had 5. "I got 5 more. Great. Here's 5 cities." Goes to the one who he just gave 1 to. He says, "Well, how'd you do?" "I was afraid of you. So I took that and I buried it in the backyard. And here it is. I'm going to give back to you what you have given me, but nothing more. I'm giving you nothing." Now, for years and years, I thought of that story in terms of the gifts or the abilities that God gives us. And I think there's some legitimate application there. But a friend of mine one time shared with me his insight into the story, and I've radically changed what I think the main point of it is. There is one thing that each one of us has been given a specific amount of and no more. It's all you get in this lifetime. It's all you get. You can't get any more. You can't get any less either. It's exactly what God has given you. You know what that is? It's time. God has ordered your days. God has set your life in His books before you were born. He said, "Yep, Pastor Kevin, he'll live at least 57 years because I've made it this far." He could say the same about you, but you don't know how many more you've been given. You don't know. And what do we invest in this life? Oh, we can take our talents and invest it, or our money, or anything else. But ultimately, where do you put your time? The days that God has given you, what are you doing with them? Where are you investing them? Are you investing them so that when you stand before the Lord and He's taking an account, you can say, "Lord, you gave me so many days of life, and here's what I have done in those days for your glory." Wow, way to go. Or will you stand before Him and say, "You know what? I was scared I might do something wrong, so I didn't do anything." God wasn't too happy with that. We don't know how many days we have. And that's what Job says here. He says, God draws the mighty away with His power. He rises up. But no man is sure of life. Not only do we not know how many days we have, we don't really know what's going to happen in those days. Next week, I could find myself in Job's situation. It's possible. I pray it doesn't happen, because I don't think God's up there bragging about me. I know me better than that. So I'm not sure I could go through as Job did. But nobody knows, and that's Job's point. He's saying, look, I know God blesses the good and curses the wicked. I know that. He said, but at the same time, nobody knows. God lifts up the mighty and keeps them, but nobody knows the days of their life. How many? And what they will contain. Job is coming to a place of understanding wisdom. With everything being stripped away in his life, he's getting to a point of understanding what wisdom is. But first, he's got to have good old Bildad come back. And all Bildad's got to say in chapter 25 is, look, a man can't be righteous before God. Duh. Did you just listen to what Job has said in response to you guys? He's stuck in the same thing. Man cannot be righteous before God. Can't be done. He's not listening. And so Job responds to him in chapters 26 and 27. And in verse 1 of chapter 26, he says, starting in verse 2, he says, how have you helped him who is without power? How have you saved the arm that has no strength? How have you counseled one who has no wisdom? How have you declared sound advice to many? To whom have you uttered words, and whose spirit came from you? You really helped me along here, Bildad. I really appreciate you coming by. Why don't you go home? And the last thing he says right there in those verses is very accurate. Whose spirit came from you? Was it God's? Or was it yours? It was Bildad's. It wasn't God's. And that's what God says at the end of the book, which we saw before. He says in verses 5 through 14, he basically says, God is mighty. He's awesome. But who can understand him? Who can put it in their head that, oh yeah, I understand God. I can tell you what God's doing in this situation. Yep, I can tell you exactly what God's doing in this situation. God's way beyond our understanding. And then Job comes back to his pledge of, I have not and I will not depart from the Lord. And then we come to this chapter 28, which is a midpoint, though not numerically. It's a midpoint in this whole book. When we started studying this book, I said, okay, we're gonna see that chapter 28 is a midpoint, and before it, we've got Job's three friends and these discourses and this dialogue. And after this, his three friends aren't going to talk anymore, but he has one more friend who comes along and tries to straighten him out. And we'll talk about him, and then there's the encounter with God Almighty, where God does speak to Job out loud and to all of his friends. But we come to this chapter 28 where Job has come through this suffering and through hearing the voice of his friends saying things that he knows are true and yet are not meeting his need. And he begins to think about wisdom. Wisdom. And he says, verse 1, surely there's a mine for silver, and a place where gold is refined. Iron's taken from the earth, copper is smelted from the ore. Man puts an end to darkness and searches every recess for ore in the darkness and the shadow of death. He breaks open a shaft away from people in places forgotten by feet. They hang far away from men. They swing to and fro. As for the earth, from it comes bread, but underneath it's turned up as by fire. Its stones are the source of sapphires. It contains gold dust. That path no bird knows, nor has the falcon's eye seen it. The proud lions have not trodden it, nor has the fierce lion passed over it. He puts his hand on the flint. He overturns the mountains at the roots. He cuts out channels in the rocks, and his eye sees every precious thing. He dams up the streams from trickling. What is hidden, he brings forth to light. He's talking about mining. And mining in the days, remember, Job lived in the days of the patriarchs, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's talking about the mining. Imagine mining in those days. Pretty amazing. And he says, and we dig down into the earth to find these precious things, sapphires and gold. In verse 12 he says, but where can wisdom be found? Where is the place of understanding? Man does not know its value, nor is it found in the land of the living. The deep says it's not in me. The sea says it's not with me. It cannot be purchased for gold, nor can silver be weighed for its price. It cannot be valued in the gold of Ophir and precious onyx or sapphire. Neither gold nor crystal can equal it, nor can it be exchanged for jewelry or fine gold. No mention shall be made of coral or quartz, for the price of wisdom is above rubies. The topaz of Ethiopia cannot equal it, nor can it be valued in pure gold.